Hello everyone, welcome to the Scumdog's Kennel. I'm your host, Chris Williams, and in today's Cryptid Corner mini episode, we have a couple of bizarre stories to read about today, folks. Both involve possible encounters with alien beings. In the first article, there's a shape-shifting UFO. In another, we have this weird phenomena in this cornfield with missing time. Both articles are truly interesting. Let's read the first one. Shape-shifting UFO followed them home in Apple Creek, Ohio. Let's get into it now and read exactly what happened to the witnesses. Something massive hovered above Blossom Road that night, so large it covered the span of 2 football fields, and so silent that the air itself felt wrong. What happened next, including its impossible transformation and the way it shadowed their car all the way to Apple Creek, raises questions far stranger than anything the sheriff's office ever imagined. Let's get into the actual story now. I was born and raised in Apple Creek, Ohio on July 14th, 1976. It was a regular night for my guitar lessons, and at 9:30 p.m. my mom and I left for home. She suggested we take the back way, Main Street to High Street, then onto Melbourne Road, heading north. We soon found ourselves right behind the state institution at Blossom Road when we saw it. Now, strangely enough, folks, at first this object was a solid UFO. In fact, it was a solid flying saucer-shaped UFO, folks. But then again, that's just the beginning of it, and we're going to get into it as we read further into this article, so let's get back to it now. There it was, as wide as 2 football fields, hovering over the road, stretching from house to house. The lights on it moved from left to right in a large rectangle shape with 2 smaller rectangles on each side, rotating, pulsing, with colors of white, red, yellow, and blue over and over. The craft had a disc shape, rounded at the top and bottom, tapering slightly at the bottom. My mom pulled into a turnaround on Blossom, and we stopped to watch this enormous object. I got near the edge of the window, and there was not a sound coming from it. We were less than a quarter of a mile away, and it was so huge that I was in awe. My mom asked again what we should do, and I said, "We're not going under it. Let's go back to Apple Creek and take Route 44. So she did. But apparently this probably isn't the end of the story, folks, because this UFO was about to astound our witnesses by changing shape, so let's read on. As soon as we started turning out of Blossom and back onto Melbourne Road, the craft shot straight up and transformed into a small red ball. You heard me right, a tiny red ball. It hovered there until we reached Route 44 directly across from it. Then it seemed to move with us, heading straight north until we got home. As soon as we arrived, that small red ball zipped away to the northeast and vanished in a flash. I know they're out there. We reported the sighting to the sheriff's office, but they just laughed and said we probably saw a combine or a tractor. That was as far as it ever went. That's my close encounter, and I'm sticking to it. Even to this day, if you ask my mom, she'll start shaking and say, I don't know what the hell it was, but it was there. Now, folks, I've heard of a few encounters with UFOs where they literally get smaller like this. I've even heard of UFOs literally transforming into other things like literal helicopters. Particularly the black helicopter phenomena is something I've known about before, folks. This UFO lines up very nicely with both kinds of stories, folks, with basically UFOs basically shrinking away, sometimes even into nothing, or transforming into helicopters or other objects like this. Either way, let's move on to the next article, folks. Missing time in Cornfield mystery suggests possible abduction. In southern Wisconsin, a rural drive in 1992 turned into an impossible mystery when a couple woke up naked in daylight with no memory of how their car had traveled 400 yards into a cornfield without leaving a single track. The missing time, the unexplained relocation, and the witnesses' lifelong pattern of craft sightings raises more profound questions about why some encounters seem to flow with people throughout their lives. Now, let's hear the actual story in its entirety, at least in their own words, everyone. Hi, I live in Beloit, Wisconsin. This event took place on June 1st, 1992. At the time, my girlfriend, who later became my wife, and I were driving around on country roads in southern Wisconsin. In the early morning hours, we had been drinking, but I want to clarify that we were not intoxicated, and there were no drugs involved. All of a sudden, the car I was driving accelerated on its own and became uncontrollable. The last thing I remember is us leaving the road and heading into a cornfield. I instinctively put my arm across my then girlfriend's chest and told her to hang on. Good. This sounds like a very decent man here, folks, but this is a very rare occurrence, folks. Usually, with stories of alien abductions or alien encounters, the cars just stole or just outright die. Here, this guy lost control of his car as if he no longer had control of it. Perhaps he didn't, folks. I mean that really. It wasn't just some sort of, maybe mistake, maybe because you think he was drunk, maybe he just had him, or just thought he had lost control of the car. No, maybe he truly lost complete control of the car and just couldn't control it because someone else was. But let's read on, folks, and then we can surmise about that. When we entered the cornfield, it was approximately 2:14 a.m. Central Standard Time. Somehow, that time has been imprinted in my mind. We finally came to a stop at least 400 yards off the road with the car wedged against a giant oak tree only a foot away from it. When we regained consciousness, we were both confused and partially clothed. We did not enter the car that way. It was now daylight, and we looked at each other in astonishment. Now, some people will basically say they just had a fun night here, folks, and that they're just making up stories. But we have heard of other accounts where people have basically woken up with their clothes rearranged. Basically, they were dressed, as if someone basically dressed them, but did not understand how clothes or their clothes actually were meant to basically be on. Basically be inside out, or basically with, I would imagine sometimes basically with their jackets on the inside of their shirts or something. So you get the idea here, folks. So, I have no doubt that our witnesses here were completely confused at what they had just experienced and were probably frightened quite a bit as well when they woke up, folks. Now, we haven't heard them say that they saw a UFO. They probably didn't, folks. And maybe later on they remembered something, like a light or something, or how they knew they were abducted. Maybe because they just came to that conclusion, folks. But let's read on and find out now. I got out of the car to gather my bearings. I analyzed how we ended up just a foot away from such a large oak tree and tried to retrace our path. To my bewilderment, there were no tire tracks or damage to the cornfield. Even though we had traveled over 400 yards, the only damage to the car was a flat tire. To this day, I cannot locate the place where this happened. I tried to find it shortly after the incident, as I was very familiar with the area, but I couldn't figure it out. Since I was 5 years old, I have seen unidentified crafts, so I'm aware of what is happening. I have more experiences, and they never seem to end. I only provided information about the unknown vehicle's colors because the form required it D. Now, our witness here, who goes by the initial D here, folks, says that he's a repeat UFO experiencer. He might even be a repeat abductee as well, folks, because all that we read about in D's story really lines up with repeat abduction accounts, folks. Not just basically seeing UFOs, but being abducted by them. Now, he didn't see a UFO when he lost control of his car, folks, and doesn't remember exactly what happened. Neither he nor his girlfriend. So we have to ask the question, folks, is why did they pick him? Were they only there for him? What about his girlfriend, who he would eventually marry? Is there a possibility that if she never married him, she would never have another experience with a UFO before, folks? Or was the fact that she came into contact with this man and she was abducted, does that mean that afterwards, if she basically never married him, would she also still be an alien abductee as well? Would she continue having these experiences? I don't know, folks, but it's terrifying if true. Either way, this man had something happen to him, and it seems to keep happening to him right now. And like with the first story, folks, with this weird phenomena, with this shape-shifting UFO, we don't know the actual truth of the matter. We know people, or at least these people, say that this happened to them. And they sound sincere to me, so maybe they are indeed speaking the truth. Either way, we're now at the end, so please go subscribe to my YouTube channel, Read Comics That Are Bad For You. You can use the YouTube link down below in the descriptions or the chat to go subscribe to me. Hit that like button for me. Make sure you're still subscribed. Leave some comments down below. Hit that bell for notifications. Hit the part of the bell that'll give you all future notifications, and please share this video out. I'm Chris Williams from the Scumdogs Kennel. Thank you all for joining me. I'll be back again tomorrow with another great video, so be sure to come back again then. Till next time, folks, I'll see you all again soon.